Hello, my name is Sophie and welcome back to my channel. I've been a bit inconsistent on the YouTube game, but it is the start of a new month, which means we have a TBR and a wrap up to do. So I thought I'd lump them into one, otherwise it just feels like I'm doing my TBR too late in the month. And I only read 3 books in March, so not got too much to wrap up there. I say only 3 books, not to say that that's not a lot of books. That for some people that is a lot of books, but for me that is below average. It's not like I'm in a slump. I was kind of in a slump for a little bit, but like what I'm calling an active slump, because I have this habit where I read every single day because I have a streak on Storygraph and I'm not prepared to break it. But I wasn't reading a lot. There was one day where I read literally 3 pages before I fell asleep. So take from that what you will. But the main reason I didn't finish any more than 3 books this month is because I'm stubborn, and I will explain why when we get to book 2. Gotta have something to keep you hooked. Either way, the first book I finished this month, I think I also included in my February wrap up because I was really optimistic and really determined that I would finish this before the end of February, but I didn't quite make it. It was March 2nd that I finished this. I was so close, but I didn't quite make it. But it was my February book club pick, which was Revolution by Jennifer Donnelly. The premise of this book, I'm going to read from the back because I'm very bad at summarising. Andy is broken. She's failing school and failing life. Since the death of her brother, all she cares about is music. Taken to Paris by her estranged father, she makes a discovery there that could transform everything. Hidden in a compartment of an old guitar case is a lost diary from revolutionary France. Alexandrine is a street performer who is trying to save a young life from the devastation of war. She writes her deepest thoughts in her diary, hoping that one day someone will read them and understand. These 2 girls, though centuries apart, are tied together by more than just the diary. As its words transcend paper and time, Alexandrine's past becomes Andy's present and lives are changed forever. I thought this was a fantastically written, coming-of-age, literary YA book. It's not categorised as literary and it is categorised as historical, though I would argue that it's not historical just because the historical aspects are told in diary entries rather than actually being set in a historical setting. But for me, that made it more accessible. The biggest thing about reading this for me is that I read it with the audiobook. I was co-reading it, and that made a huge difference into how engaged I felt with the story, because so much of it is set in Paris and the historical elements are about a French character. Having those bits read in a French accent made such a difference. I mean, the example I gave when I was talking about this in my weekly reading vlog is that there's a character called, if I was to read it in my accent, I would call him Virgil, but with the French pronunciation it's more like Virgil, and obviously that sounds much nicer than Virgil, but I would never have known to pronounce it like that if I hadn't been listening to the audiobook as well. I rated this 4 stars, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The only reason it wasn't a 5-star for me is because the ending was a little bit far-fetched and it just didn't quite meet my expectations of where I expected the book to go, which is kind of not the book's fault, that's kind of my problem, but I didn't love where it did go. So it was 4 stars, but it was really, really close. If I did half and quarter ratings, it would definitely be a 4.75, but that's too complicated for my brain. I like to keep things simple, so it is a 4-star book, but I really thoroughly recommend. I've not seen anyone talking about this and I think it's genuinely fantastic. If you like John Green's kind of literary YA writing style, you'll like this. This made me feel really nostalgic for reading those kinds of books when I was a teenager, and it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. Thoroughly recommend. Then the other 2 books I read in March were part of the Hades and Persephone saga by Scarlett St. Clair. I have had this graphic in my downloads folder on my computer for months because I feel like I have been talking about this series for months. I initially started reading it, I think I read A Touch of Darkness maybe this time last year, so it's taking me about a year to get around to finishing this series. But the basic principle is there are 2 trilogies that make up this saga. There's the whole trilogy told from Persephone's point of view, and then basically the same story told from Hades' point of view, and you're meant to read them kind of one from each side. So Persephone 1, Hades 1, Persephone 2, Hades 2, Persephone 3, Hades 3, except I didn't find that out until I was halfway through reading Persephone 2, having not read Hades 1. So I decided to commit and I finished reading the Persephone trilogy, and then I went on to the Hades trilogy. I think I read the first Hades book last summer, and then I've been putting off reading the other 2 ever since then. But the newest book in the series, which is kind of a finale to both trilogies, which is dual perspective and told from, you know, Persephone and Hades, it ends the whole series. It's the 7th book, came out this month, so, well, it came out in March, And my goal was that I wanted to read both of these, the last two books in the Hades trilogy, before A Touch of Chaos came out. Except what I didn't anticipate is that the Hades books were so long. The first book I read was A Game of Retribution, which is the second book in the Hades trilogy, and that was 465 pages. I rated this one 3 stars. I thought it was fine. I liked the elements of the kind of the more plot-based stuff from Hades' perspective, and kind of the stuff that he was doing and what was going on while Persephone wasn't there, and these elements are definitely driving more of the overarching plot. But all of the scenes with Persephone felt really, really repetitive, because Hades as a character isn't very guarded, so there isn't much that you can get from reading from his point of view that you don't already understand from reading from Persephone's point of view. So those scenes did feel really repetitive because nothing new was being added. And also, this book was so smutty. I'm not against smut. I think it has a time and a place, and it can really enhance a relationship in an adult book, but the smut in this book just became completely meaningless. It felt so unnecessary. They'd be mid-conversation and then suddenly they're talking about, not even just talking about sex, they're just randomly having sex, and it was really disjointing. And yeah, I just became totally desensitized to it. I'd be reading this book and I would roll my eyes and my husband would go, "Oh, are they having sex again?" That's the level of smut in this book. And for some people, I'm sure they would enjoy that, but for me, it felt completely meaningless and it made me enjoy the book less. So that was 3 stars. But this book is the reason I finished so few books this month, because I was originally going to I was going to co-read it like I have been reading all of my books recently, but I didn't want to use my Spotify hours too early in the month. So I was like, it's fine, I can still read a book without an audiobook. It'll be fine. Except what I've learned is at the moment, I can't really do that. I found it really challenging. I found it much more difficult to engage with just using my own brain rather than feeling like I was being read to. So I stumbled through reading this book, sometimes 3, 6, 7 pages at a time for 3 weeks. It took me 3 weeks to finish this book, all because I was too stubborn to just say, actually, I'll find this easier if I use the audiobook. So it was kind of on me, because I didn't just kind of cave or accept the help that an audiobook would give me. But on the other hand, I wasn't massively enjoying the book. It felt very slow paced, especially for how long it was. And I think part of it was that I was so tired that I was falling asleep so quickly, so that made the book feel even more disjointed because I was reading it in such small segments. But we got there eventually. The last maybe 20% I did listen to the audiobook and I finally finished it, so I was glad to finally get through that one. And then the last book I finished in March, and the last book in the Hades trilogy, is A Game of Gods. I actually rated this one 4 stars. It's difficult to explain. Well, is it difficult to explain? I think the main reason I enjoyed this one more is because there was less smut and because there was more plot. All of the plot elements that had been set up in the previous 2 Hades books kind of came to light, and he started to share more of the information with Persephone as the whole kind of political Greek god war stuff kind of started to fall into place. I love a political fantasy, and I particularly love a Greek political fantasy, and the elements of this story that aren't just about Hades and Persephone's love story have finally started to all come together, and I really enjoyed the political setup of this book. I also read 50% of this book in one day because I went away with my husband. Well, I tagged along on a work trip, so he was at work and I was kind of pottering around a new town, and I've coined a new phrase. I've called it coffee shop hopping, where you just go from different coffee shops until you feel you've extended your welcome, and then you go to a different coffee shop. And I just sat in 2 to 3 different coffee shops reading my book throughout the day while he was at work, and it was glorious. It was a very relaxing experience. I thoroughly recommend it. Also, just saying the phrase coffee shop hopping, it's really fun. Really enjoyed it. Yeah, I really enjoyed A Game of Gods, and then I finally got to start A Touch of Chaos. I didn't finish it within the month, but I'm about halfway through A Touch of Chaos at the moment and really enjoying it. If you want more up-to-date thoughts, I will be uploading the backlog of my weekly reading vlogs in the coming days, so there will be talk of it there as well. And that's the March wrap-up segment done. Then we move on to the April TBR. I think I've explained this before, but I will very briefly explain it again. The way I make my TBRs is that I have kind of categories, and it's more functional than how I see other people making their TBRs. I call it functional because it has a function and not because I don't think other people's TBRs aren't functional. So the categories I have I've recently cut down the number of categories in my TBR because it was getting unreasonably long, so I no longer have Kindle Unlimited or Audible as categories on my TBR because I use Audible all the time, especially as I'm co-reading so much at the moment, and Kindle Unlimited is mostly just a distraction from my physical TBR, so I'm going to be cancelling that. But the other categories I have are my book club book from the wedding library, the subsidiary kind of book club challenge that I'm doing with reading the famous 5 books, any new releases I've pre-ordered, which this month is 3. April is a popular new release month. And then we have 2 of my 24 in 2024 books, which I'm also behind on, but not the point. And then any subscription books. So I have 2 active book subscriptions at the moment, and that's Illumicrate and Afterlight. I did skip the March Illumicrate book, so I don't have an Illumicrate book to read this month, and my Afterlight book hasn't been shipped yet. So my March Afterlight book hasn't arrived, and it's April, but it will go on the TBR as and when it does arrive. With the Afterlight book, I think I have 9 books on this TBR, so I've not cut it down much at all, but for some reason I'm really optimistic about my TBR for this month, so let's just jump right in. And I vaguely put them in the order that I want to read them in as well. So let's jump right into it. The first book I want to read this month when I finish A Touch of Chaos by Scarlett St. Clair is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This was my March book club pick, but I spent so long reading the Hades trilogy I didn't get around to my book club pick, so I still need to read The Hobbit. But the thing with this book is that it is also on my 24 in 2024 list, so by reading this one book I get to tick it off 2 lists. I consider this a very productive read. Does reading need to be productive? No, but this is. I have a version of this on my Kindle. This specific edition I believe came from my nan's book collection and was published in the 70s, so I don't really want to read this because I want to keep it as pristine as I can, but I do have it on my Kindle and it is on Spotify as an audiobook, so that is how I will be consuming this. But I'm late to the book club, but I'm getting there slowly but surely. So in terms of the category it meets for this month's TBR, it's counting as my 24 in 2024 book, but it is also my March book club pick. And speaking of March books that I didn't get around to but I should have, The Famous 5. I have a little goal for myself this year that I would like to read one of these a month, except I've not done that very well so far because I missed January, read 2 in February and missed March and can't talk anymore. So this is the book I should have read in March. It's the 3rd book in the series, 5 run away together, and I need to catch up and read this. Book 4 will appear shortly. Then, in an effort to not get behind on my book club book again, I then want to read my April book club pick, which for this month is The Player of Games by Ian M. Banks. I've never heard of this book before, but it was my turn to choose the book club pick this month, and I wanted something short and engaging and not literary because I have so many books to get through that I want to give myself the best chance to get through as many of them as I possibly can. So let's read the blurb because I need to get better at actually telling you what these books are about. The Culture, a human-machine symbiotic society, has thrown up many great game players, and one of the greatest is Gurga. Jurna Morat Gurga, the player of games, master of every board, computer and strategy. I need to sneeze. Oh dear. Bored with success, Gurga travels to the Empire of Azad, cruel and incredibly wealthy, to try their fabulous game. A game so complex, so like life itself, that the winner becomes emperor. Mocked, blackmailed and almost murdered, Gurga accepts the game and with it the challenge of his life and very possibly his death. This is giving me Ready Player One sci-fi vibes, and honestly that sounded really engaging. I read a few more blurbs from other books in our wedding library, and whilst they sounded good, they did not sound more engaging to me than this. This is what I fancy reading this month, and it's not too long either, so should be a good win, hopefully. I think I'm going to really enjoy this. I'm looking forward to reading it. Then we get back to The Famous 5. We have book 4 in the series, which is 5 Go to Smuggler's Top. I don't think I need to explain this. It's a Famous 5 book. That's it. That's the whole thing. Then we have my other 24 in 2024 book on my list for this month. This one is carried over from March. I was meant to read this last month, but I didn't because We all know why by now. And that is The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. This is the first book in the Dreamland Billionaire series. It's super popular online. I've heard really mixed things. I did start reading it because I think it's on Kindle Unlimited, so I started reading it on my phone when I was bored the other day, and I wasn't greatly taken by it, but I'm gonna give it a chance because I'm incapable of DNFing books. But the premise, if you haven't heard of this book: Rowan: I'm in the business of creating fairy tales, production companies, 5-star hotels, theme parks. Everything can be mine if I renovate Dreamland. Hiring Zara was a great plan until I fell for her. By the time I realised where I went wrong, it was too late. People like me don't get happy endings, not when we're destined to ruin them. A tortured hero. Zara: after submitting a drunk proposal criticising Dreamland's most expensive ride, I should have been fired. Instead, Rowan Kane offered me a dream job. The catch: I had to work for the most difficult boss I'd ever met. Rowan was rude and completely off limits, but my heart didn't care, at least not until I discovered his secret. It was time to teach the billionaire that money couldn't fix everything, especially not us. I'm not sure I'm gonna love this. I've had a bit of hit and miss with like popular book talk books, but I own it, I paid money for it, so I'm going to read it. And we have the first of the 3 new releases I've pre-ordered this month. This one came out on April 2nd, so I have already received my copy. That is the reappearance of Rachel Price, the newest release by Holly Jackson. It's another YA crime mystery thriller book. I have a mixed relationship with Holly Black because, not Holly Black, this is Holly Jackson. Oops. That's not a good start. I loved the first and second books in A Good Girl Guide to Murder series, but book 3 I hated. I thought it just completely changed direction of the character, and I didn't like its representation of mental health at all. I actually disliked it so much that I've got rid of my copy. I only have the first 2 books in the series on my shelf now because I disliked book 3 so much, and I haven't read 5 Survive. I do have it, but the concept of this sounds really cool. So the blurb says, 18-year-old Belle has lived her whole life in the shadows of her mum's mysterious disappearance. 16 years ago, Rachel Price vanished and young Belle was the only witness. Rachel is gone, presumed dead. The case is dragged up from the past when the Price family agrees to a true crime documentary. Belle can't wait for filming to end, for life to go back to normal, but then Rachel Price reappears and life will never be normal again. Lights, camera, lies. If this is anything like A Good Girl Guide to Murder, I think it'll be a really fast-paced, easy read, and I am looking forward to it, but I am dubious. I feel like I've been burned by Holly Jackson before, and we'll see how this goes. And the other 2 books on my list are the other 2 new releases I pre-ordered, and those are But Everyone Feels This Way: How an Autism Diagnosis Saved My Life by Paige Leal, which is a non-fiction book. Paige is a TikTok autism advocate who has made loads of really helpful videos about autism, and is part of the reason I realised that I might be autistic and have pursued my own diagnosis. So I'm really interested to see how her narrative voice translates into the written word. So yeah, I believe that book has already been released in the US and Canada, so I'm just waiting on the UK release date, which I believe is the 17th of April. But yeah, obviously not got that yet because it's not out. And then the last book on my list that I have pre-ordered doesn't come out till right at the end of the month, so maybe I should put it on May's TBR rather than April's TBR, but we'll see where we are at the end of the month. But that book is Funny Story by Emily Henry, which I believe comes out on the 28th. I've deluded myself into thinking I'm a massive Emily Henry fan, except I've only read one of her books, and one book does not a fan make. So I'm not sure what to expect from going into this, but Emily Henry's got such a good reputation, and generally I do like those kinds of books. I lump Emily Henry in with the kind of Ali Hazelwood's, Helen Huang's of the romance world. I really did love Beach Read, so I have high hopes for this, and everyone I've seen that has read the arc of Funny Story has absolutely adored it. So yeah, really looking forward to that new release as well. So those are the 9 books that I'm hoping to read in April. Honestly, now that I've stopped deluding myself that I need to read without an audiobook, I feel much more confident that I'm going to finish more books this month. So I'm currently reading A Touch of Chaos. I'm also still listening to the audiobook for The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, but I did pick up a second-hand physical copy for £2 in a charity shop last weekend, which I'm absolutely buzzed about, and I only have this much left, so I may try and binge read that one afternoon. maybe this week, who knows, but shouldn't really prioritise it when it's not on my TBR. Either way, that is my March wrap up and my April TBR. As always, please tell me in the comments what you've been reading and what you've been enjoying. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time for another bookish video. Bye!